Ole Miss finishes their last practice before the massively important scrimmage, and we talked to Michael Katz all about today and last night. Let's see what he has to say. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I'm your host, Steven Willis, and we will bring in Michael Katz from the Northeast Mississippi Tupelo Daily Journal to talk about today's practice, a little bit about last night's practice, and everything you could want to know about backup quarterbacks. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And please give us a like, a subscribe, and a comment on your way out. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now. All right, let's bring in Michael Katz. And Michael, listen, Trinidad Chambliss is likely going to be a package quarterback, but is he a better quarterback overall? Like if for some reason, if Austin Simmons went down, would it be A.J. Maddox?
Well, that's a good question. We actually talked to both today, which was a little bit of a surprise. We're kind of getting to that point in camp where we're running out of main characters and we just kind of get what we get. But Chambliss mentioned that people think of him as a runner, and he does say he's a dual threat, and there's no question the stats back that up, what he did last year at Ferris State. But he kind of wanted a little bit more credit for what he can do as a passer. If we're doing the eyeball test, and that's a dangerous game to play, obviously, I think Maddox is the more impressive thrower, right? He's got a really big arm. He's close to 100% from what he said. The ball looks good when it comes out of his hand, but I do think there is something to be said for a guy who started a lot of games. And I know it wasn't at the FBS level, but he won a national championship at Ferris State. He's led a locker room. It's interesting. The package idea is one that's kind of been floating around, and obviously we're not going to get confirmation until games start. Mm-hmm. But if it was an extended period of time, at least to me, it feels like you change the offense less for Maddox.
Yeah, and the package stuff, the thing that we've talked about for a couple of weeks since Trinidad Chambliss's name popped up was kind of I guess it was 2006 Florida when Tim Tebow was a freshman. And Chris Leak was the starting quarterback. Maybe it looks a little bit like that moving forward, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal is to have Austin avoid the sorts of hits that Jackson. Jackson enjoyed the voluntarily put himself through. I think that you probably don't want to have that happen again. With Austin, they are different players. Obviously, Austin can run, but they're different runners, different style players. I think you're probably trying to take some hits away from Austin when you can. And if you can put in a guy who, he had 25 rushing touchdowns last year and ran for 1,000 yards. He knows what he's doing as a runner. And I think when you can put a guy in who is an actual threat as a passer too, I do think it adds a little something.
Should be interesting. Like practice ended up being closed for visibility today, just so everybody knows. And the rumor is it was kind of a walkthrough anyway. They're getting ready for the scrimmage tomorrow. So we're going to talk a little bit about last night and what you saw and what went on there. I heard that Womack had a pretty big day. I heard that he was rotating with Princewill Umanmielen at the jack position. That tells me, Michael, that Cam Franklin is coming on faster than everybody thinks.
Yeah, and we spoke with Pete Golding yesterday, who once again gave a master class. He is you can't help. He is such a football guy. It's just it's great. Well, hearing him talk ball is a true treat. But he mentioned Cam Franklin as one of the guys who's taken the biggest jump this offseason. And listen, when you bring a guy in like that, at a high school, a highly touted guy, you're expecting him to have this sort of role at some point. It sounds like now it's just time. And Pete mentioned like they didn't take any interior defensive linemen in the portal this year. They feel really good about those sorts of spots. And the quote unquote edge rushers, the Prince Lee type guys. You got his brother, he's a different player. And then you brought in Womack to sort of to add depth and create some explosive plays on the outside. But I think they feel really good about, even if they hadn't added those guys, about that front, and then just bringing into talented edge rushers. I think they feel really, really good. And Pete Golding really hammered that home, that they've really emphasized keeping guys close to home who are really talented and showing them, hey, you can be a really good defensive lineman here. We did this at Alabama. Look what we just did with Walter Nolan and Princewill Umanmielen. You can come and be an NFL player if you come here.
Yeah, and Pete Golding actually mentioned the thing that got my attention. He said that at this point of the season, like, we haven't actually played games yet this season, but he's ahead of Princely right now. And Princewill being ahead of Princely, they might be different type players, but I think the way that I understood that and the way he was talking about coming in, he's a little bit more plug and play than Princely was. Princely had some stuff to work on during the season.
Yeah, and I know Princely was injured when he got here, and so he didn't get some of those reps in the spring. But from what Pete said, it's obviously, again, different players, but right now in their process, Princewill is stronger at the point of attack, from what he said. And I think that's really important because we all know what Princely was able to do as a pass rusher. That was like never in question, but maybe early on you would have to sub him out for things. I think the hope is, you obviously love Princewill to be as good of a pass rusher as his brother. But it seems like you're not going to have, even early in the season, situations where you have to sub him out or rotate. Obviously, Princely ended up being very stout against the run as the season went on, but it sounds like Princewill is further along in that regard, and part of that's because he's been healthy, and part of that is just, I guess, who he is. So I think, again, do we expect him to have 10.5 sacks this year? Who knows? But it sounds like they're expecting him to be a really good player.
Everybody's talking about Xavier Harris. Everybody's talking about Jam Brown and William Eccles, the interior of that defensive line. What's a name that we haven't been hearing that's showing out a little bit?
Ooh. I hate to say it's like all the typical suspects, but I do think it is interesting you bring up Xavier Harris, because I know he's been here for like 15 years, but it still kind of feels like he's a forgotten man to an extent. Again, we talked a lot about the talented guys they've brought in the last few classes with Brown and with Franklin and with Eccles and guys like that. But Xavier Harris has started 10 games in his career. He's been very, very good. I swear he gets taller every time I see him on the field. He's got to be like 6'11" now. But I think he's a really interesting one that sort of gets lost in the shuffle unless you're really in the weeds on Ole Miss. He was a really big part of what they did last year. Maybe didn't get the credit because he's not Walter Nolan. He's not JJ Pegues. He's not those frontline guys that we talk so much about. Xavier Harris, if Ole Miss's defense is going to be as good as it can be, and I do think it can be really, really good, Xavier Harris is going to have a monster year, and I think that he's shown it in flashes. He's been a role player. I think that he's got a chance to be really, really good.
When we come back, we will ask Michael Katz about Dante Core, the story of fall camp right now for Ole Miss. But first, I do want to tell you about Wayfair. As summer winds down, there's something nice about getting back into a routine you love. Wayfair makes it easy to set yourself up and kind of handle what is going on, really, if you're going to be honest about it. Wayfair makes it to where you can get bedding and linens and storage solutions for every single room. Wayfair is your one-stop shop to refresh your home. I recently grabbed a recliner for my surgery that I had earlier this year from Wayfair. It has been the perfect addition to my home, even after the recovery and everything. Now it's at the point where I would fight you over that. Wayfair made that happen. This is the perfect time to get your home ready, whether that is organizing or upgrading a workspace or making weeknight dinners easier. Get organized and refreshed and back on the routine for way less. Head to wayfair.com to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP or iron a long shot division winner or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. So take a flyer on that MVP race. I like Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders for MVP. Crown your champion in August. I think this might be Buffalo's year finally. Or parlay a division winner dark horse, maybe the Miami Dolphins and the New Orleans Saints. Visit FanDuel's app today and start planning your future bets now. Futures Day is just one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. All right, we're going to bring Michael Katz back in. And Michael, listen, one of the cool stories of fall camp has been Dante Core. Because whenever he started working, he was running with the threes. He was swimming like all freshmen do. He was in the car in Memphis, and he went through all of that, and he got back, and that started an ascension to the point where all of a sudden you're looking out there on the ones on defense, and there is Dante Core taking those reps. And Pete Golding called him out. Lane Kiffin has called him out. It's at the point where everybody needs to pay attention to this player. He was an Auburn commit at one time that they got, but he was just a 3-star. This isn't the Caleb Cunningham that's making a splash. This is a very, I don't know, it's probably before your time, a Mike Hilton-like story.
Yeah, no, he sticks out. I mean, you see him making plays, and again, there's so many new players on the roster. I've constantly find myself going and being like, wait, who's number so-and-so? I'm like, oh my goodness, that's a freshman. Like it's pretty insane, the things that he's able to do. And again, Pete Golding sang his praises, and Lane Kiffin was spoke very highly of him a couple of days ago. And again, he doesn't always, Lane doesn't throw around, flowery compliments and whatnot. So for him to mention a freshman like that, I think is a really big deal. Obviously a lot's been made of this new look secondary and how are the pieces going to fit, and who's going to step up at certain spots. And I'm sure the hope is every year that there's some person who comes, I don't want to say from out of nowhere, but who rises to the challenge and makes an impact who maybe you weren't expecting. And he's been hard to miss over these last few weeks.
Yeah, he's the story of fall camp, and I'm excited about that because you have something to actually talk about that you can kind of sink your teeth into a little bit. When everything is very antiseptic, everybody's camp is kind of the same thing and the same stories and all of that stuff. Something this is a little bit different. Patrick Kutas made his return to practice earlier this week. What have you noticed for him?
I think I know we talked a lot about the offensive line and maybe its struggles in that scrimmage, and that's a double-edged sword because that means the defensive line's really good. But that was one of the big conversation pieces last week. I think it is really important to note that we know there's guys missing. Kudis, he was such a big piece of what this offensive line is probably going to be in terms of he was a highly touted guy coming out of the portal. He's one of the top portal guys, period. I think that having him back is going to be really, really big. We know the talent's there. He's played, and I think that I think I already thought even without him, I thought they were going to be okay on the offensive line, but when you add him, it makes you have more depth, and you add a talented piece that, quite frankly, I think is going to be huge for them. So I think getting him back, I'll be really interested to see what the scrimmage looks like when he's in there, in terms of how much better, how much do things improve in terms of the blocking when he was in there.
Yeah, and those questions, because during the fall camp, the offensive lineman that you talked about, everybody knows about Jaden Williams, everybody knows about Diego Pounds, but it's been PJ Wilkins, it's been Delano Townsend, it's been Terrence Davis to some extent. Those young guys on the offensive line, are they like them, they're physical, are they game ready is I guess my point.
That's a good question, and I think you got to hope they are, but at the same time, I think that's why getting Kutas back is so big, because you know that he's game ready. He's played. There's a reason he was so highly thought of. And again, I think with guys like Wilkins, I think he started 2 games last year at Charlotte, and obviously Townsend is a talented guy from UAB, but you don't know if those guys are ready for the SEC quite yet. At least we don't know that. But I'm not a betting man, but I put good money on Patrick Kudis being ready for it. So I think having him back, knowing what you're going to get, is going to be really big.
All right. So today was the backup quarterbacks. What did you learn?
Well, one, I don't think we'd ever talked. I would never talk to AJ Maddox because we're not allowed to talk to true freshmen. So that was nice to hear from him for the first time. Trinidad Chambliss is a really he's really well spoken. He seems like a guy who has led a locker room, just in the presence, the way that he answers questions, the thoughtfulness. I straight up asked him, Austin Simmons is going to be the starter. Like, why did you come to Ole Miss out of all the places you could have come to? And he's like, I'm a guy who bets on myself. This was a really good opportunity for me. And Austin, everybody knows about Austin, but he wanted to bet on himself. And I thought that was really interesting. I think it got a lot of guys, especially in this portal era, run from competition and challenge, especially a guy who, again, he just won the national championship at the D2 level. He was pretty set there. He was the guy. I'm sure there could have been other programs where he would have had a better shot at seeing consistent action. But I do think there's something to be said for a guy who believes in himself. And I thought that was just really, I thought that was good to hear, just from the wholesomeness of college football. I feel like a lot of people talk about losing the heart of college football and guys running from challenge and whatnot. It was nice to hear from him talk about, like, hey, like, no, I know that the cards are probably stacked against me here, but I don't care. This is good for me. AJ Maddox, it sounds like he is close to 100% after dealing with that injury in the spring. He's looked really good throwing the ball, and he said he likes the way he's been spinning it. He was asked what it's like to face his brother every day in practice. That's got to be pretty wild at the college level, at least. But it is interesting, though, to going back to the question you asked at the very start. If the bullets were flying, who comes in if Austin gets hurt? It's hard, man. I think a lot of it depends on again, you never want your starting quarterback to go out, but what the injury was, the length of time, all those sorts of things. But I think they feel pretty good about both those guys. They're obviously very different players, but at least in talking to both of them, they're confident in what they can do.
Yeah, when you look at Trinidad Chambliss, and he reminds me, whenever I go back and look at what he's done, because what I'm about to say is before the spread offenses, those quarterbacks would have looked completely different in the spread offense. But he looks like those 90s option quarterbacks, like the Tommy Frazier's, the Scott Frost. That is what his game stylistically looks like to me.
Yeah, and he's not the biggest guy. We saw him without pads for the first time today, and I'm not sure what he's listed as on the website, but it's I think I'm not sure actually. I'm not even going to venture to see what it is on there, but he's not the biggest guy, and he just looks like a normal guy. He's got huge legs. I will say that he does not miss squats. And I think that's a guy who's done a lot of running in his career. But I do think that, and he made it clear, he was asked what his style is. And he's like, yeah, people think I'm just here to be a runner, but I can throw it too. He was asked about the differences of quality of player, between Ole Miss and Ferris State. And I think it would have been really easy for him to be like, man, like it's so crazy here. But he was like, he gave his guys at Ferris State like credit. He was like, hey, like that's a powerhouse over there. That's a national championship program. Now he did bring up that the depth in the lines is a really big part of it. And I think that's what most people will say is that the differences in the offensive and defensive lines at those levels are pretty drastic. But again, it was really cool to hear him, not to hear him, hype up his current team, but also hype up his former team. And he was just a really pleasant guy to talk to.
Yeah, it should be really cool. If they get to a point against Georgia State, he comes in, or the first time there is a fourth down play, the JJ Pagee thing is, there's rumors going around all over the place, but that's essentially what it is at this point. It's just rumors. But I'm curious to see how Trinidad Chambliss gets used and if they decide to use him for something other than just being the backup quarterback, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and he was asked point blank about has he been approached about any specific packages and whatnot, and he gave the company line of no, of course not. Because of course, you're not. He's smart enough to know that the biggest way you get in the doghouse is giving away scheme and whatnot. Yeah. But again, I think there's got to be a place for him.
Yeah. One thing that the Florida football scout said, Brian Smith, we were talking about Trinidad Chambliss and everything. His thing. What is your thought on this? Both in the backfield with Austin Simmons and him at the same time.
Ooh. Well, there could be some interesting shenanigans unfolding there.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff because the whole thing yesterday with Pete and with Charlie Weiss was about positional versatility. If you listen to it, it's all about cross-training positions all over the field. So what do you got going on, Michael, at the Daily Journal this week?
Well, somehow we are only 2 weeks away from the season, which I cannot believe. I watched a high school football game last night. I can't believe that had already started. But I think week 0 is next week, so we're getting awfully close. I can't give too much away, but I got a really, really cool feature coming. I think people are going to like it. It's coming for game week. Again, don't want to. I want to keep it pretty close to the vest, but it's a really interesting one that covers a lot of ground on a lot of different things. But in the meantime, we talked to the coordinators for maybe the only time this year, depending on what happens in the postseason. I know that certain bowl games make coordinators talk. So we'll see what happens with that, but potentially the only time that we got to talk to them. And so I had a story on Charlie Weiss yesterday. Today's story is going to focus on Pete Golding. And Pete, again, he talked for 20 minutes. That man, he holds court.
That's amazing.
Again, it's a master class, and there's a lot of interesting stories coming from him, just not only talking about his thoughts on the transfer portal, and how he wants guys who have played, because if you're not playing, there's usually a reason. I thought that was really interesting. His thoughts on Suntarine Perkins and what's next for him. Just a lot of really cool stuff. I think there's going to be a lot of Pete Golding stories coming out in the next few days.
Yeah, he talked about scheme fit too, of where it goes. That could be the reason that they weren't as successful at their previous spot, and they're just more of a fit for the Ole Miss thing. I'm glad to hear a coach talk about that, because that's something that I mention just every single time there's a kid being recruited. It's like, is this guy a scheme fit?
Yeah, no, and again, when Pete Golding breaks it down the way he does, it makes sense, right? Like it's like,
it's amazing. You can tell he's a good coach.
Yeah, well, I know. There's a reason he's a very wealthy man, and now wealthier. But yeah, no, he just has a way of breaking it down that is very, it's simple and it makes sense. And again, for him to talk about wanting guys who have played in the SEC, that's always a preference, because I think he said you don't want guys who are taking photos on the field.
Georgia.
Like that's a real thing. Like when you get guys from lower level programs, like maybe the moment's too big. And of course, he brought up the Georgia game from a couple years ago. That was a moment where he was like, okay, we need ready-made SEC players. So it's just hearing his philosophy is always fascinating. It would be awesome if we got to do it more. But man, he could have gone for hours yesterday. He was incredible.
All right, Michael Katz from the Northeast Mississippi Tupelo Daily Journal. Thank you very much for stopping by, Michael. And real quick, I do want to let everybody know that thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives like Michael, which is why we're the front door of Ole Miss. If you don't believe me, search Ole Miss podcast. We're 80% of that page when it comes up on Google. So don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the video, and comment on the video. It helps the show and it's completely free. Also, hit the audio. If you're listening on the audio side, subscribe to that podcast as well and leave a 5-star review for that. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hotty toddy, everybody. And remember, it's just analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.